The conference room felt colder than usual that Tuesday morning. I sat across from Derek Chen, the new VP of Operations, and Pauline Grant from HR. Both wore expressions I'd seen before, the kind of corporate empathy that costs nothing and means less. "Rachel," Derek began, adjusting his tie, "we want to thank you for your 12 years of dedication to Vitatech. Your contributions to the medical imaging division have been substantial." I nodded once. The word substantial hung in the air like smoke. Not exceptional, not groundbreaking, substantial. The kind of word you use when you're about to deliver bad news with a smile. Pauline slid a folder across the polished oak table. "The company is undergoing a strategic realignment. We're consolidating several technical roles into a more streamlined structure." I didn't touch the folder. I kept my hands folded in my lap, fingers interlaced. Calm. Professional. Exactly what they expected from Rachel Nguyen, the quiet engineer who never made waves. "Your position as senior imaging systems architect is being eliminated," Derek continued. "We're transitioning to a consultant-based model for specialized technical work. More flexible, more cost-effective. Cost-effective. Another word that meant everything and nothing. "We're offering a generous severance package," Pauline added quickly. 24 weeks of pay, extended health benefits through the end of the year, career counseling services, and of course we'll provide excellent references." I looked at Derek. He was 42, recruited from a Silicon Valley startup 6 months ago with promises of disruption and innovation. He'd spent exactly 1 meeting with me since his arrival, nodding politely while I explained the technical architecture of our imaging compression system. I could tell he hadn't understood a word. "When does this take effect?" I asked. My voice was steady, no tremor, no anger. "We'd like you to transition out by the end of next week," Derek said. "We'll need comprehensive documentation of your current projects. Knowledge transfer sessions with the remaining team. Standard protocol." Standard protocol? As if there was anything standard about erasing 12 years of institutional knowledge in 5 business days. I opened the folder. Inside was a severance agreement, a non-compete clause, and a list of company property I'd need to return. Laptop, security badge, access credentials. The usual inventory of a corporate life reduced to line items. "I'll need some time to review this," I said, closing the folder. "Of course," Pauline replied. "We'll need your signature by Thursday. The severance package is contingent on a clean separation. No disputes, no complications." They wanted me gone quickly. Quietly. A name removed from the org chart. An expense eliminated from the budget. Another middle-aged woman disappeared from the tech industry without ceremony. I stood, tucking the folder under my arm. "I'll have my decision by Thursday." As I walked out, I heard Derek's voice behind me, already moving on to his next meeting. "Pauline, can you send me the Q3 budget projections? I want to review the consultant allocations before the board meeting." They'd already forgotten I was in the room. My office was on the 3rd floor, tucked into a corner away from the main engineering bay. Not a power office with glass walls and city views. Just a functional space with a desk, 2 monitors, and 12 years of accumulated reference materials lining the shelves. I closed the door and sat down. My hands were still steady. That surprised me. For a moment, I just stared at the screens in front of me. Empty. Waiting. Like they always had been at the start of a workday. I thought about calling my husband, James. But what would I say? That I'd been fired, restructured, realigned? The corporate euphemisms didn't make it hurt less. And I wasn't ready to process the hurt yet. Not when there was work to be done. I opened my personal laptop, the one I brought from home, not company property, and navigated to a folder I'd created 3 years ago. A folder I'd honestly hoped I'd never need. The files inside were meticulously organized. Patent applications, development logs, timestamp documentation, email chains. Every piece of evidence chronicling the creation of the adaptive neural compression algorithm that powered Vitatech's flagship medical imaging system. The same algorithm that processed over 40,000 diagnostic scans daily across 1,700 hospitals worldwide. The same algorithm that generated roughly 38% of Vitatech's annual revenue. The same algorithm that I had developed entirely on my own time, using my own equipment, without a single dollar of company funding. 3 years ago, I'd filed for a patent under my own name. Not Vitatech's. Mine. I'd done it quietly, carefully, working with an intellectual property attorney I'd met at a Women in Tech conference. The patent had been granted 14 months later, and I'd never mentioned it to anyone at work. Not because I planned to leave, but because I'd watched too many brilliant engineers have their innovations stolen, repackaged, and sold without credit or compensation. I'd learned early that protection wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Vitatech thought they owned my work because they'd employed me while I created it. They'd never bothered to check the development history, never questioned how I'd solved a problem that had stumped their previous team for 2 years. Never asked where I'd done the breakthrough work that made their product possible. They'd simply assumed. And assumption, I was about to demonstrate, was expensive. I pulled up the patent documentation and began reviewing every detail. The filing date, the claims, the technical specifications. Everything was in order. Everything was mine. Then I opened my employment contract, the one I'd signed 12 years ago when Vitatech was still a 20-person startup with dreams of revolutionizing medical imaging. I read through the intellectual property clause carefully. It stated clearly that any inventions developed using company time, resources, or facilities belonged to Vitatech. But it said nothing about inventions developed independently, on personal time, with personal equipment. That was the loophole I'd built my protection around. My phone buzzed. A text from Kimberly Joe, one of the junior engineers on my team. Just heard. This is insane. Are you okay? I typed back. I'm fine. Let's talk tomorrow. News traveled fast in a company this size. By now, everyone in the engineering division would know. Some would be shocked. Some would be relieved they weren't next. Most would update their LinkedIn profiles tonight, just in case. I spent the rest of the afternoon documenting everything. Not the knowledge transfer Derek wanted. That could wait. I was documenting my own position. Every email that referenced the algorithm. Every meeting where I'd presented technical solutions. Every decision point where Vitatech had chosen to commercialize technology I'd created. By 5 o'clock, I had a timeline that was bulletproof. At 5:30, I locked my office and walked to the parking garage. My car was on the 3rd level, parked in the same spot I'd used for 7 years. Habit and routine. The comfortable patterns of a life that was about to change completely. As I drove home through rush hour traffic, I thought about Derek's words. Strategic realignment, cost-effective, streamlined structure. Corporate language designed to obscure human consequences. Designed to make eliminations sound like evolution. But evolution, I knew, favored those who adapted. And I'd been adapting for 12 years. James was already home when I arrived. I could smell dinner, something with garlic and rosemary coming from the kitchen. He appeared in the doorway as I set my bag down, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "You're home early," he said. Then he saw my face. "What happened?" I told him. Everything. The meeting, the severance package, the timeline. He listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from surprise to anger to something harder to define. "They can't just do that," he said finally. "After 12 years? After everything you've built there?" "They can," I replied. "And they did." James crossed his arms. "So what are you going to do?" I met his eyes. "I'm going to let them find out what they actually eliminated." Over dinner, I explained the patent, the documentation, the careful separation between my work and Vitatech's ownership. James, who managed supply chain logistics for a manufacturing company, understood immediately. "They don't know," he said slowly. "They think they own it." "Correct?" "And they're about to find out they don't." "Correct?" He leaned back in his chair. "How long do you think it'll take?" I considered the question. Derek wants to bring in consultants. He'll probably spend 4 to 6 weeks vetting candidates, conducting interviews, negotiating rates. Then they'll need to onboard whoever they hire, review the existing codebase, understand the architecture. By the time they realize the algorithm itself isn't Vitatech property. I paused. 3 months, maybe 4. And then? Then they'll panic. James was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. The kind of smile he only showed when he was truly impressed. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" "Not planning," I corrected. "Preparing. There's a difference." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, from clarity. For the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing my career without the fog of daily routine. All the small dismissals, the interrupted meetings, the ideas credited to male colleagues, the promotions that went to people with half my experience but better networking skills. I'd tolerated it all because I loved the work, because I believed in the product, because I thought loyalty and competence would eventually be rewarded. Now I understood that loyalty without leverage was just unpaid labor. At 2 a.m, I got out of bed and returned to my laptop. I drafted an email to my IP attorney, explaining the situation and requesting a consultation to discuss next steps. Then I researched Vitatech's corporate structure, identifying key stakeholders who would be involved in any licensing negotiations. By dawn, I had a strategy. Not revenge. Revenge was emotional and short-sighted. This was business. Cold. Methodical. Exactly what Derek would appreciate if he were capable of appreciating irony. Thursday morning arrived. I'd spent Wednesday completing the knowledge transfer documentation Derek requested, a comprehensive overview of my projects, deliverables, and technical specifications. Everything except the one thing that mattered. The algorithm documentation remained conspicuously absent. I'd simply noted, "Proprietary methodology, see patent US 10, 847,392 for technical details." No one noticed. At 10 o'clock, I walked into Pauline's office with the signed severance agreement. She looked relieved. "Thank you for handling this professionally, Rachel," she said, accepting the folder. "I know these transitions are never easy, but you've made it as smooth as possible." I nodded. "I appreciate the severance package. It's generous." It was generous. 24 weeks of pay gave me 6 months to explore options without financial pressure. They thought they were buying my silence. They were actually funding my preparation. "Your last day will be next Friday," Pauline continued. "We'll arrange a small farewell gathering with your team. Nothing formal, just cake and coffee in the break room." Cake and coffee. 12 years reduced to sheet cake from the grocery store, and lukewarm coffee in disposable cups. "That sounds nice," I said, "because that's what you say. Because corporate protocol demands gratitude even in dismissal." As I left her office, I passed Derek in the hallway. He was on his phone, talking animatedly about quarterly projections. He didn't look up. That afternoon, I met with Kimberly and the rest of my small team. 4 engineers, all talented, all underpaid, all uncertain about their futures now that I was leaving. "What's going to happen to the imaging project?" Kimberly asked. "You're the only one who really understands the compression architecture." "Derek's bringing in consultants," I replied. "They'll figure it out." Michael Chen, the newest member of the team, frowned. "But the algorithm, that's your design, right? The adaptive neural network processing?" "It is." "So the consultants will just reverse engineer it from the codebase?" I smiled slightly. They can try. The team exchanged glances. They knew something was off, but they couldn't quite identify what. I'd trained them well. They trusted their instincts even when they couldn't articulate the warning signs. Rachel, Kimberly said carefully, is there something we should know? I considered the question. These people had worked alongside me for years. They deserved honesty, within limits. The algorithm uses a proprietary methodology, I said slowly. The implementation in VitaTech's system is based on that methodology, but the underlying architecture isn't documented in our repository. Anyone trying to modify or extend it will need access to the original patent specifications. Which VitaTech has, Michael said. It wasn't a question, it was an assumption. I didn't correct him, not yet. You should all update your resumes, I said instead. Just in case Derek's reorganization doesn't stop with me. They understood. Within a week, I knew all 4 of them would have updated LinkedIn profiles and active job searches. Loyalty died quickly when the company demonstrated none in return. My last week at VitaTech passed in a blur of exit interviews, system access revocations, and awkward hallway conversations with colleagues who didn't know what to say. Some offered sympathy. Some offered networking contacts. Most just avoided eye contact. Friday afternoon arrived. The farewell gathering was exactly as promised. Grocery store cake, weak coffee, and 15 minutes of forced small talk in the break room. Derek made a brief appearance, thanked me for my substantial contributions, and left before the cake was even cut. At 5 o'clock, I handed my security badge to reception, carried my box of personal items to my car, and drove away from VitaTech for the last time. I didn't look back. There was nothing to see. The first month of unemployment was strange. Not in a bad way. Just unfamiliar. I'd worked continuously since graduating college at 22. 30 years of structure, routine, and professional identity. Now I woke up without alarm clocks or meeting schedules. James suggested I take time to decompress before job hunting. He was right. I needed distance to process what had happened, to separate my sense of self from my job title. I spent mornings reading, not technical journals. I'd read enough of those for a lifetime. Fiction, history, biography, books I'd been meaning to read for years but never had time for. Afternoons, I walked. Our neighborhood had trails I'd never explored, parks I'd driven past 1,000 times without stopping. I discovered I enjoyed walking, the rhythm, the silence, the absence of agenda, but I wasn't idle. In the evenings, I worked with my IP attorney, preparing for what was coming. We reviewed the patent documentation. We researched comparable licensing agreements. We developed a pricing structure that reflected the algorithm's market value. And we waited. 6 weeks after my departure, Kimberly called. Rachel, she said, her voice tight. Something's happening at work. Derek brought in a consulting firm to audit the imaging system. They've been here for 2 weeks, and they're confused. Confused about what? About how the compression algorithm actually works. They can see the implementation in the code base, but they can't find the underlying architecture documentation. They keep asking us where the original specifications are. What are you telling them? The truth, that you designed it, that you never documented it in the company repository. I smiled. And what did Derek say? He's furious. He's demanding we reverse engineer it from the working code. But Michael tried, and he says it's impossible. The algorithm is too complex. Too many interdependent components. Without the design specifications, any changes could break the entire system. That sounds challenging. Rachel? Kimberly's voice dropped. Michael found something, a reference in one of your old code comments. It mentioned a patent number. We looked it up. I waited. It's your patent, not VitaTech's. You own the algorithm. I do. Silence. Then, does Derek know? Not yet. Oh my God! Kimberly laughed. A short, sharp sound. He's going to lose his mind. Probably. Rachel, I have to tell you something else. The consultants are saying they can't maintain the system without access to the original design. They're recommending VitaTech develop a replacement algorithm from scratch. Derek asked for a timeline. They said 18 to 24 months. Minimum. 18 to 24 months, during which VitaTech's flagship product would essentially be frozen. No upgrades, no improvements, no competitive advantage, and during which their hospital clients would start exploring alternatives. What are you going to do? Kimberly asked. Nothing, I replied. I'm going to wait for them to figure it out on their own. And then? Then we'll see if Derek understands cost effectiveness. The crisis took another month to fully materialize. I followed it through industry contacts, former colleagues, and carefully worded updates from Kimberly. The consultants had delivered their assessment. The board had been briefed. Derek had been given an ultimatum: find a solution or find a new job. I knew the call was coming before my phone rang. Ms. Nguyen, the voice said. Professional. Tense. This is Richard Moss from VitaTech's legal department. We need to discuss a matter regarding intellectual property. Of course, I replied. I assume you're calling about U.S. Patent 10,847,392. A pause. You're aware of the situation. I'm aware that VitaTech has been using technology I developed and patented independently. Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Ms. Nguyen, we'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss this matter. Would you be available next week? I would, but I should mention that I'll be bringing my attorney, and I'll need to see documentation of VitaTech's current usage of the algorithm before any meeting, for licensing purposes. The pause stretched so long I thought the connection had dropped. Finally, licensing? Of course, VitaTech doesn't own the patent, but I'm willing to negotiate a licensing agreement, at market rates. I see. His voice had gone cold. We'll be in touch. He hung up. I immediately called my attorney. They know. Good, she replied. Let them sweat. They'll call back within 48 hours with a meeting request. Probably with a lowball offer attached. She was wrong. They called back in 6 hours. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at VitaTech's headquarters. I arrived with my attorney, Elena Rodriguez, a woman who'd spent 15 years specializing in IP disputes. She'd seen this scenario play out dozens of times. She knew exactly how it would end. We were shown to a conference room on the executive floor, the one with the glass walls and city views I'd never rated. Waiting inside were Richard Moss, Pauline Grant, Derek Chen, and a woman I didn't recognize who introduced herself as Victoria Barnes, VitaTech's general counsel. Everyone shook hands with the stiff formality of people who desperately wanted to be anywhere else. Thank you for meeting with us, Victoria began once we were seated. We appreciate your willingness to discuss this matter. Elena smiled. My client is always open to reasonable business discussions. Then let's be direct, Victoria continued. VitaTech believes it has valid claims to the technology in question. The algorithm was developed during Ms. Nguyen's employment. It was implemented in VitaTech products using company resources. These facts establish ownership under standard employment law. Elena didn't miss a beat. The algorithm was developed entirely on Ms. Nguyen's personal time, using her personal equipment, with no company funding or resources. The patent application documentation includes time-stamped development logs that prove this beyond dispute. VitaTech never filed its own patent because it never developed the technology. Ms. Nguyen did. Richard leaned forward. The implementation is a derivative work, Elena interrupted smoothly. Licensed, implicitly under Ms. Nguyen's employment. But the underlying methodology remains her intellectual property. VitaTech has been using it without formal licensing terms. That ends now. The room went silent. I watched their faces carefully. Victoria's expression remained neutral. She'd expected this. Richard looked angry but controlled. Pauline seemed confused, like she couldn't quite follow the legal implications. Derek looked terrified. Finally, Victoria spoke. "What are you proposing?" Elena slid a folder across the table. A licensing agreement. Vitatech gains permanent, exclusive rights to use the algorithm in its current product line. In exchange, Ms. Nguyen receives a one-time licensing fee and ongoing royalties on gross revenue from products utilizing the technology. "How much?" Derek asked bluntly. "The initial licensing fee is $2.5 million. Elena said calmly. "Royalties are 3% of gross revenue from all products using the algorithm, payable quarterly, with annual auditing rights to verify revenue reporting." Richard nearly choked. "That's absurd. We'll contest this. You'll lose," Elena said simply. "And you'll spend 18 months in litigation while your product stagnates and your clients migrate to competitors. My client is offering you a business solution. I suggest you take it." Victoria raised a hand, silencing Richard. "We'll need time to review this proposal. Discuss it with the board." "Of course," Elena replied. "You have 2 weeks. After that, my client will begin offering licenses to Vitatech's competitors." That got their attention. "You can't," Derek started. "She absolutely can," Elena said. "The patent isn't exclusive to Vitatech. Ms. Nguyen has every right to license it to multiple parties. She's simply giving you first opportunity to secure exclusive rights. I'd advise you not to waste it." The meeting ended shortly after. No handshakes this time. Just stiff nods and the barely concealed fury of people who'd realized they'd been outplayed. As Elena and I walked to the parking garage, she allowed herself a small smile. "That went well." "They'll fight it," I said. "They'll threaten to fight it. Then they'll run the numbers, realize litigation would cost them more than licensing, and they'll sign. Give them 10 days. She was wrong again. It took 8. The licensing agreement was finalized on a Wednesday morning in late October. I signed the papers in Elena's office, watched her notarize them, and felt 12 years of careful work finally crystallize into something concrete. $2.5 million, plus royalties. More money than I'd earned in my entire career. Money that represented not just the algorithm's value, but acknowledgement. Recognition. Proof that my work had been worth something beyond a salary and occasional praise. That afternoon, I received an email from Kimberly. "Don't know if you've heard, but Derek resigned this morning. Board accepted immediately. Rumor is they're restructuring operations again. Michael and I are updating our resumes. Figured you'd want to know." I replied, "Good luck with the job search. If you need a reference, let me know." Within 2 weeks, all 4 members of my former team had left Vitatech. I hired 3 of them, Kimberly, Michael, and David Okafor, for a new venture I was funding with the licensing proceeds. A small consulting firm specializing in medical imaging technology. Independent, agile. Built on the principle that technical innovation deserved proper recognition and compensation. We signed our first client in December. A hospital system interested in developing custom imaging solutions. They'd heard about the Vitatech situation through industry channels. They wanted to work with someone who actually understood the technology. Someone who owned it. 6 months after my last day at Vitatech, I attended a medical technology conference in Boston. The same conference I'd attended every year for the past decade, usually representing Vitatech at a small booth in the back corner. This year, I was a keynote speaker. The topic, protecting your innovations in corporate environments. The audience was packed, mostly women engineers, researchers, and technical leads. People who understood what it meant to have your work appropriated, your contributions erased, your value questioned. I told my story, not as revenge fantasy. As case study. I explained the importance of documentation, the necessity of understanding employment contracts, the value of protecting your intellectual property before you need that protection. After my talk, dozens of people approached with questions. Many shared their own stories of innovation stolen, credit reassigned, careers stalled by corporate politics. I listened. I offered advice. I handed out business cards. One woman, maybe 35, waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. "I'm a lead engineer at a biotech company," she said quietly. "I've been developing a new protein synthesis methodology. It's brilliant. It's going to be worth millions, but it's all in my company's repository, all documented on their systems." "Do you have personal backups?" I asked. "No, I never thought." She trailed off. I pulled out one of my business cards, wrote Elena's contact information on the back, and handed it to her. "Talk to this attorney," I said, "today, before you do anything else. She'll help you understand your rights and protect your work." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." I squeezed her hand gently. "Protect yourself. No one else will do it for you." That evening, as I sat in my hotel room reviewing emails, I thought about Derek, about VitaTech, about the system that had tried to erase me. They'd taught me an important lesson, though they hadn't meant to. They'd taught me that loyalty was transactional, that corporate family was a fiction, that the only protection worth having was the kind you built yourself. I didn't hate them. I didn't need to. Hatred required emotional investment they hadn't earned. Instead, I felt something simpler, something cleaner. I felt free. A year after my departure from VitaTech, the company announced a major restructuring. The medical imaging division was being sold to a larger competitor. The press release cited strategic refocusing and shareholder value. It didn't mention that the division's flagship product had stagnated, that hospital clients had been quietly migrating to newer solutions, that VitaTech's innovation pipeline had dried up the moment they eliminated their research architects in favor of consultants. I read the announcement over morning coffee. James looked up from his own laptop. "Thinking about going back?" he asked. I laughed. Never. My consulting firm now employed 12 people. We had contracts with 8 hospital systems and 3 medical device manufacturers. Our revenue projections for next year exceeded $2 million. We were building something real, something sustainable, something that valued people's contributions rather than treating them as disposable. I'd learned what I was worth, and more importantly, I'd learned how to protect that worth. Derek had called that cost-effective. I called it survival, and I'd become very, very good at it. On the anniversary of my last day at VitaTech, 2 years after they'd handed me a severance package and shown me the door, I drove past their headquarters. The building looked the same. Glass and steel. Corporate logo shining. No indication of the chaos inside. I didn't slow down. Didn't feel anything particular. It was just a building where I used to work. A chapter that had closed. My phone rang. Elena. "Just got word," she said. "VitaTech's being acquired. The board accepted a buyout offer. You know what this means?" "The licensing agreement transfers to the new owner," I said. "Correct. And the new owner will want to renegotiate. You could probably get better terms. Maybe double the royalty rate." I thought about it. Not long. "Let's leave it as is. The agreement's fair." "Fair?" Elena sounded surprised. "After what they did to you?" "It was never about revenge," I said. "It was about getting what I was owed. I got it. That's enough." We talked for a few more minutes, discussing some pending contracts for my firm. Then I hung up and continued driving. The past was handled. The present was stable. The future was mine to build. And I'd learned the most valuable lesson of my career. Never let anyone else define your worth. Never depend on their recognition or validation. Document everything. Protect your work. Know your value. And when they tell you you're being restructured, smile politely, sign their papers, and walk out knowing exactly what they just gave up. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply being valuable enough that losing you becomes their problem, not yours. I'd become that valuable. And I'd never let anyone forget it again. 3 months after Vitatech's acquisition announcement, I received an unexpected email. The sender was someone I hadn't thought about in years, Dr. Sarah Chen, the founder and former CEO of Vitatech. She'd retired 5 years ago, selling her majority stake and disappearing from the industry entirely. "Rachel, I heard what happened. I'm in town next week. Coffee?" I stared at the message for a long time. Sarah had recruited me personally, back when Vitatech was just 12 people working out of a converted warehouse. She'd promised a company that valued innovation, that respected technical expertise, that would change medical imaging forever. For the first few years, she'd kept that promise. I replied, "Tuesday, 10 a.m., the Hart House on Madison." Sarah looked older than I remembered. Her hair had gone completely silver, and she moved with the careful deliberation of someone managing chronic pain. But her eyes were still sharp, still analyzing. We ordered coffee, made small talk about the weather, her garden, my consulting firm, dancing around the real conversation. Finally, she set down her cup. "I owe you an apology," she said directly. "I built a company that promised one thing and became something else. I should have protected people like you better before I left." "You couldn't have known," I said. I knew the board was pushing for cost optimization. I knew they wanted to bring in outside management with different priorities. I convinced myself that the culture was strong enough to survive leadership changes. I was wrong. She pulled out her phone, opened her email, and turned the screen toward me. It was a message thread from 4 years ago, shortly before her retirement. The subject line: Research Division Cost Analysis. I skimmed the messages. Board members discussing headcount reduction, ROI calculations, recommendations to eliminate senior technical positions in favor of contractor relationships. My name appeared in 3 separate emails. "They wanted you gone even then," Sarah said quietly. "I fought it. I told them you were irreplaceable, that your work was the foundation of our entire product line." They smiled and nodded and waited until I wasn't there to stop them. I handed her phone back. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you deserve to know it wasn't about your value. It was never about your value. It was about quarterly earnings calls and investor presentations. It was about men who understood spreadsheets but not innovation." She paused. "And because I want to make it right." "I'm not looking for vindication," I said carefully. "I'm not offering vindication. I'm offering partnership." That got my attention. Sarah pulled out a business card. Heavy stock, elegant design. "I've been building something new, quietly, a medical AI company focused on diagnostic imaging. We're funded, we're incorporated, we're ready to start hiring technical leadership." "You want me to work for you again?" "No," she corrected. "I want you to be a co-founder. Equity ownership, board seat, equal decision-making authority. And I want to license your algorithm as the foundation of our first product. Fair market terms. Everything documented. Everything protected." I studied her face. She wasn't selling. She was offering. There was a difference. "Why me?" I asked. "You could hire anyone." "Because I made a mistake letting you go the first time. Even indirectly. And because I spent 5 years watching the industry reward mediocrity while punishing excellence. I'm done with that," I want to build something that works the way it should have worked at VitaTech. How many other co-founders? 3. 2 technical, 1 business. All women. All people who've been pushed out by companies that didn't recognize their worth. I sipped my coffee thinking. My consulting firm was successful, stable, mine. But it was also small, limited. We served clients. We didn't build transformative technology. This was different. This was the opportunity to build something from the ground up, with protection, with equity, with people who understood what it meant to be dismissed. I'll need to review the terms, I said finally. And I'll need my attorney involved from day one. Sarah smiled. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. The due diligence took 6 weeks. Elena reviewed every document, every incorporation paper, every equity agreement. She negotiated terms I wouldn't have thought to ask for. Intellectual property protections, voting rights, anti-dilution provisions, exit guarantees. When she finally gave her approval, I knew it was solid. I signed the co-founder agreement on a Friday in February. 20% equity, board seat, chief technology officer title, and a licensing agreement for my algorithm that included upfront payment plus percentage of revenue from any products using the technology. My consulting firm would continue operating. I'd promoted Kimberly to managing partner, but my primary focus would shift to the new venture. MedAstra, we called it. A name that suggested both medical precision and reaching for something higher. The other co-founders were exactly as Sarah described. Dr. Lisa Park, a machine learning specialist who'd been forced out of a major tech company after reporting harassment. Jennifer Okoye, a former FDA regulatory expert who'd been dismissed for being too cautious about patient safety. And Michelle Torres, a healthcare business strategist who'd walked away from a toxic private equity firm. 4 women who'd been told they were problems, who'd been restructured, realigned, and strategically eliminated. We understood each other immediately. Our first product was ambitious, an AI-powered diagnostic imaging system that could detect early-stage cancers with higher accuracy than human radiologists. The foundation was my compression algorithm, enhanced with Lisa's machine learning models and refined through Jennifer's regulatory expertise. We worked 16-hour days. Not because we had to, we were equity owners now, not salaried employees, but because we wanted to. Because we were building something that mattered. Something that had our names on it. 6 months in, we had a working prototype. 9 months in, we had FDA approval for clinical trials. 12 months in, we had partnerships with 3 major hospital systems. And 18 months after I'd signed that co-founder agreement, we had our first FDA clearance for commercial deployment. The industry noticed. The press coverage was significant. Not because of the technology alone, medical AI was crowded space, but because of the story behind it. 4 women who'd been pushed out of their previous companies, building something revolutionary together. We didn't shy away from that narrative. Sarah handled most of the press, telling the story carefully but honestly. She talked about second chances and the waste of dismissing experienced talent. She talked about building companies that valued innovation over cost optimization. She never mentioned VitaTech by name. She didn't have to. One morning, I woke up to find my phone flooded with messages. I scrolled through them, confused, until I found the one from Kimberly. Check the Wall Street Journal. Front page of business section. I grabbed my laptop. The headline read, "The patent that changed medical imaging and ended a career." The article was detailed, thorough. It traced my career at VitaTech, the development of the algorithm, my dismissal, and the subsequent licensing agreement. It included quotes from former colleagues, industry analysts, even some of VitaTech's hospital clients who'd switched to competing products after the quality stagnated. And it included a response from VitaTech's new owners, who'd tried to renegotiate my licensing agreement and failed. They'd called the terms onerous and anti-competitive. The article's author had responded with the algorithm's revenue impact, estimated at $40 million annually for products using the technology. My 3% royalty, $1.2 million per year, suddenly looked very reasonable. The article ended with a quote from me, from an interview I'd done 3 weeks ago and forgotten about. "I don't think I'm unique. I think there are thousands of women in tech who've developed innovations that were taken, repackaged, and sold without credit or compensation. I was lucky. I documented my work. I protected myself. But the real question isn't why I succeeded. It's how many brilliant innovations we've lost because the people who created them were treated as disposable." The article went viral. Over the next month, I received over 300 emails. Many were from women sharing their own stories. Innovations stolen, credit reassigned, careers derailed. Some were from journalists requesting interviews. Some were from attorneys asking if I'd serve as an expert witness in IP disputes. And some were from VitaTech employees, current and former. One email stood out. It was from Michael Chen, who'd left VitaTech and joined my consulting firm 2 years ago. "Rachel, something happened today I thought you should know about. Derek Chen reached out to me. Asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee. Said he wanted to clear the air about some things. I told him I'd think about it. Should I go?" I stared at the message for a long time. Derek, the man who'd eliminated my position, who'd called it cost-effective, who'd resigned in disgrace when the algorithm crisis became public. I typed, "That's your decision, Michael. But if you do meet him, keep it professional. And don't sign anything without letting Elena review it first." Michael went to the meeting. Called me afterward. "He's broke," Michael said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and something darker. "His severance ran out. He can't find work. Every company he interviews with knows about the VitaTech situation. They Google his name and find articles about the patent disaster." I said nothing, just listened. "He wanted to know if you'd be willing to put in a good word for him. Said he'd made mistakes but deserved a second chance. Said the whole thing had been blown out of proportion by the media." "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth, that you didn't ruin his career. He did that himself when he eliminated the person who created the company's most valuable asset. And that if he couldn't understand that, he didn't deserve a second chance." Michael paused. "Was that too harsh?" "No," I said quietly. "That was exactly right." 2 years after founding MedAstra, we had 4 products in commercial deployment, partnerships with 12 hospital systems, and annual revenue exceeding $30 million. We'd raised a Series B funding round that valued the company at $200 million. My 20% stake was now worth $40 million on paper. More importantly, we'd built something that worked. Our employee retention rate was 96%. Our technical staff was 60% women, unheard of in medical technology. And our products were genuinely improving diagnostic accuracy, catching cancers earlier, saving lives. We'd proven something, that companies built on respect and equity could succeed. That dismissing experienced talent was expensive. That protecting innovation benefited everyone. One afternoon, Sarah stopped by my office. We still kept it casual, no formal meeting requests between co-founders, and sat down with an odd expression. "Guess who called me today?" she said. "I'm not good at guessing games." VitaTech's board, or rather, the board of whatever the acquiring company renamed it. They want to acquire MedAstra. I set down my coffee carefully. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I'd discuss it with my co-founders, but I wanted to know your thoughts first." I leaned back, processing. VitaTech, or what remained of it, wanted to buy the company we'd built, from the ashes of what they'd destroyed. The irony was almost too perfect. "What's the offer?" I asked. $400 million, all cash. They want our AI platform. They want our hospital relationships. And, though they didn't say it explicitly, they want to bury the story of what happened to you. What do you want to do? Sarah smiled. 2 years ago, I would have said no immediately, out of principle. But now? She gestured around the office. We've proven what we needed to prove. We've built a successful company. We've changed the industry. The question is, what do we want to do next? I thought about it. Not for long. The answer was clear. We walk away, I said. All of us. With enough money to never worry about corporate politics again. And then we do it again. Build something new, something better. Sarah's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. The acquisition closed 4 months later. $400 million, divided among the co-founders and early employees according to equity stakes. After taxes and legal fees, my share came to $62 million. I sat in Elena's office staring at the wire transfer confirmation, unable to process the number. You okay? Elena asked. I don't know what I am, I admitted. 12 years ago, I was fired from a job that paid $95,000 a year. Now I'm sitting here with $62 million. You earned it, Elena said simply. Every penny. You created technology worth hundreds of millions. You protected it. You built a company around it. This isn't luck. This is the value you generated finally being recognized. That night, James and I sat on our back deck, drinking wine and watching the sunset. We'd already talked about what the money meant, the freedom, the security, the opportunities. But we hadn't talked about the other thing, the thing that mattered more than the money. You proved them wrong, James said finally. Everyone who dismissed you, everyone who thought you were replaceable, you proved them all wrong. I didn't do it to prove them wrong, I said. I did it because I didn't have a choice. They eliminated my position. I had to survive. And you did more than survive. You built something remarkable. I sipped my wine, thinking. You know what's strange? I don't feel vindicated. I don't feel triumphant. I just feel tired. Like I spent years fighting a battle that shouldn't have been necessary. It shouldn't have been necessary, James agreed. But you fought it anyway, and you won. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared below the horizon. The next morning, I started drafting plans for something new. Not another company. Not yet. A foundation. One focused on helping women in STEM protect their intellectual property, providing legal resources, education, support networks. Because my story had a happy ending, but I knew thousands of others didn't. And maybe, with the resources I now had, I could change that. 5 years after walking out of Vitatech for the last time, I stood on a stage at MIT, delivering a commencement address to the graduating engineering class. The auditorium was packed, hundreds of young faces looking up, eager and uncertain and hopeful. I told them my story, all of it, the dismissal, the patent, the licensing battle, the company I'd built, the acquisition. But I spent most of my time on the lesson that mattered. Your education ends today, I said. But your real education, the one that determines your career, your success, your ability to protect what you create, that education starts tomorrow. And the first lesson is this. Document everything. Understand your employment contracts. Protect your innovations. Because the companies that hire you will promise loyalty and family and shared success. And some of them will mean it, but some of them won't. And you won't know which is which until it's too late. I paused, looking across the sea of faces. I'm not telling you to be cynical. I'm telling you to be prepared. To value yourselves enough to protect your work. To understand that your innovations have worth beyond your salary. And to never, ever let anyone convince you that you're disposable. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of students approached with questions. Many wanted career advice. Some wanted mentorship. And some, the ones I paid closest attention to, wanted to know exactly how to protect their intellectual property. I gave them Elena's card. I gave them information about my foundation. And I gave them the same advice I'd followed myself. Be valuable. Know your value. And never let anyone take it from you. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and checked email. Most of it was routine: foundation business, investment updates, speaking requests. But one message stood out. The sender was Derek Chen. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Rachel, I know I have no right to contact you. I know what I did was wrong. I've spent 5 years trying to rebuild my career, and I've failed. Every interview ends the same way. They Google my name, find articles about Vitatech, and the conversation ends. I'm writing to ask if you'd be willing to meet. Not for a job, not for a reference, just to talk. To understand what I should have understood then. I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm asking anyway. Derek. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the laptop without responding. Some lessons people had to learn alone. Some consequences couldn't be negotiated away with meetings and apologies. Derek had made his choices. He'd valued cost-effectiveness over people. He'd dismissed experience in favor of consultants. He'd eliminated positions without understanding what he was eliminating. I'd made my choices too. I'd protected myself. I'd built something new. I'd survived and then thrived. He wanted understanding, forgiveness, redemption. I'd spent 12 years earning what I had. He could spend the next 12 earning his own second chance. I turned off the light and went to bed. The past was handled, the present was secure, and the future belonged to people who understood what I'd learned. In the end, the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was building something so successful that everyone who dismissed you had to watch you succeed. And never, ever looking back.